it was explicitly not about Benghazi. It was about the overall situation in the region, the Muslim world.
I don't believe that.
It was about Benghazi.
I believe it was about Benghazi because the second tick in those talking points was something to the order of, we need to bring to justice those people who have harmed Americans. And the only place that happened was Benghazi.
So when the White House talked about that, they were lying.
Lying's a strong word. I didn't believe what they were saying. I think the line in there that says, one of our objectives here, right, on this Sunday show is to blame the video rather than a failure of policy. I think that that is crossing the line between national security and politics. Were they intentionally lying? I don't know. I don't know. You have to ask them.
Yesterday he said Jay misled the public and reporters in suggesting that that memo was not politicized. Is he lying then or is he lying now?
Well, again, I think that the point that Mr. Morell makes in his book is the relevant one, which is that it is false to suggest that this thing has been politicized. This tragedy has been politicized by the administration. I think, unfortunately, we have seen some, again, as Mr. Morell says, some who have sought to rather cynically try to score political points by politicizing what is a legitimate tragedy, and that's unfortunate.
Well, the reaction to Mike Morell's interview, he's got a new book out talking about Benghazi, and they're specifically about the talking points in the White House version of the talking points that steered Susan Rice to those 5 Sunday talk shows. We're back with the panel. Steve, overall, the interview and this specific point.
Well, I think on that specific point you get a sort of a window into the problem with Mike Morell, what he's trying to do now. Mike Morell's trying to rewrite history on Benghazi, particularly with respect to his role. And frankly, if I were Mike Morell and I had his history on Benghazi, I would want to rewrite it too. But the problem is what he's done in rewriting it in his interview with you, in his interview elsewhere, in his book, is as misleading as his original role was in Benghazi. And I will give you 2 examples. We could talk about this for an hour, but I don't think Greta wants to give up the next hour. So 2 examples. One, he complains bitterly in the book about cherry picking. He says, well, my critics are cherry picking. They're taking some information that supports their case and leaving out stuff that doesn't support their case. Well, he does the exact same thing, and he does it throughout his entire 2 chapters on Benghazi, and he did it in his interview with you. One specific example was when we were talking about, or when he writes about, whether this was a pre-planned attack or not. Well, you interviewed the CIA contractors who wrote the book 13 Hours, and they said there had been surveillance of the facility. And in their book they wrote that that surveillance sent them into high alert. It was a big deal that they were casing the facility hours before the attack. It doesn't appear in Mike Morell's book. He simply leaves it out. Now, you can have questions about what they say. You don't have to agree with what they say, but you can't just set it aside, and that's what he does repeatedly. The other example is your exchange with him on Abu Khatala and the indictment. And again, whether this was a pre-planned attack. He seemed utterly unfamiliar with the specifics of that indictment. So he says, well, wasn't clear that they were attackers, wasn't clear that they wanted to hurt anybody, wasn't clear really what they were doing. Well, the indictment very specifically and repeatedly 5 different times says they came there to kill. Abu Khatala knew that this was a CIA facility. He knew that the other one was a CIA cover. He wanted to go in and kill Americans because he thought what they were doing, he thought their intelligence activities there were illegal. Very specific language, presumably based on intelligence that we've gathered. And he sort of shrugged that off when you asked him about it. Well, you can't shrug it off. And I guess the final question I would have is, don't we deserve something better in this country than to have intelligence professionals who mislead as a matter of course, who did it at the time, who do it in their book, who do it in interviews? And shouldn't we expect that our intelligence professionals would tell the truth and be straight with the American people?
Okay, A.B.
Well, I mean, Steve is right. This man's credibility has been questioned now going back years. He was accused by Republican senators of lying in his congressional testimony. And it is true that it doesn't make a lot of sense that he sees it both as a spontaneous event, but one that was a terrorist attack. So that was sort of confusing. I think going forward, if nothing else happens to Hillary Clinton on Benghazi, the fact that an Obama administration official said that the State Department failed to protect that ambassador and those 3 other men is a big deal, and we'll follow her in the campaign.
You weighed in last night, but the biggest thing out of all of this?
He comes out as an unreliable witness, a man who appears to have been over his head and is now covering his tracks.
That's it for the panel, but stay tuned for a look at one candidate's awkward moments.